There is a road in America where you can drive for miles without seeing a town, a gas station, a traffic light, or another human being. A road where the mountains seem to move closer while civilization moves farther away. In 1986, Life magazine gave this highway a name that was supposed to keep people away: the loneliest road in America. But here's the part almost nobody tells you. This road was once anything but lonely. Soldiers crossed it. Pony Express riders raced across it. Miners built entire towns beside it. Railroads fought their way through it. Immigrants died here. Millionaires built strange castles here. And thousands of ordinary Americans once depended on this corridor to cross the continent. Today, much of it feels abandoned. So what happened? Why did people come here in the first place? Why did they leave? And why? After more than a century of people trying to conquer this landscape, does the desert still seem to be winning? The first thing you notice about US-50 is not a building. It is the absence of buildings. The highway cuts across central Nevada like a black line drawn across an enormous map. On either side are mountains, sagebrush, dry valleys, and open sky. There are no suburban neighborhoods slowly blending into the desert. No continuous strip malls. No endless billboards. The road simply exists between places. And the farther you travel, the more you begin to understand that the emptiness is not an accident. This is the Great Basin, a landscape built almost perfectly to resist dense human settlement. Long mountain ranges run roughly north to south, separated by enormous valleys. You climb one range, descend into a basin, cross the valley, and another mountain wall appears. Then another, and another. It is almost as if the landscape has been repeating the same obstacle for hundreds of miles. Water makes the story even stranger. The Great Basin is internally drained. Much of the water that falls here does not eventually reach the ocean. It evaporates or collects in closed basins. To a modern traveler, this produces spectacular scenery. To the people who crossed Nevada in the 19th century, it meant something much more serious. Water could determine whether you continued or stopped. A mountain pass could determine whether a route was practical. A mistake could mean miles of unnecessary travel. The landscape wasn't merely beautiful. It was an obstacle. In 1859, U.S. Army Captain James Harvey Simpson was sent into this country to survey a shorter route across the Great Basin. The existing route followed the Humboldt River, but the Army wanted a more direct path. Simpson crossed the mountains and valleys, recorded the terrain, documented water sources, and produced a route that would influence transportation across Nevada for decades. He wasn't looking for a tourist attraction. He was looking for a way through a place that seemed determined to stop people from getting through it. And once someone found a way through, other people followed. In 1860, the Pony Express began operating between Missouri and California. Riders carried mail across the continent at extraordinary speed, changing horses at relay stations along the way. Across Nevada, many of those stations followed the route surveyed by Simpson. Imagine what that meant. There was no air conditioning, no GPS, no modern road service. A rider could be crossing a landscape where the next station was miles away. The weather could change, and the darkness could swallow the trail completely. The Pony Express was built around speed, but the landscape was built around resistance. Some of those stations have almost completely disappeared. Others survive as ruins, and that is one of the first secrets of US-50. You can drive past pieces of American history without realizing they're there. Near Sand Springs, for example, the landscape preserves traces of the Pony Express era. The station existed because travelers needed somewhere to stop in an environment where stopping was not always optional. The desert surrounding it looks almost empty today, but more than 160 years ago, this was part of a transportation network carrying urgent mail across the country. The Pony Express itself lasted only about 18 months before the transcontinental telegraph made its incredible speed-ups. OLIT, a system that had required riders, horses, and relay stations, was suddenly competing against electrical signals that could cross the continent almost instantly. The riders disappeared, the horses disappeared, the stations disappeared, the road remained. Then Nevada discovered something underground that would change everything. Silver. During the 1860s. Mining discoveries transformed parts of central Nevada almost overnight. One of the most dramatic examples was Austin. Today, Austin is small enough that you could drive through it without realizing that it was once a major mining boom town. But when silver was discovered, people came rushing into the desert. The population exploded. Saloons opened. Hotels appeared. Businesses followed the miners. Government buildings were constructed. Newspapers began reporting from a place that had recently been little more than wilderness for a brief moment. Austin represented one of America's favorite dreams: find something valuable, build a town, become rich. But the desert has a habit of collecting the remains of failed dreams. The richest silver became harder to extract. Mining declined. The population fell. The businesses that had depended on thousands of residents began disappearing. Austin survived, but the boom did not. And then someone built a castle. On a ridge overlooking the town stands Stokes Castle, a bizarre 3-story granite structure commissioned by wealthy financier Anson Phelps Stokes. It looks completely out of place. Medieval architecture, native stone, desert mountains, endless sky. It is the kind of building that makes you stop and ask the most useful question in historical storytelling. Why is that here? Stokes had the money to create his desert retreat, but the dream didn't last. His family occupied the castle for only a short period before the property changed hands, and the building was eventually abandoned. Today, its shell remains above the town like a monument to the strange confidence of the mining era. A man once looked across this empty Nevada valley and thought, "I can build something here." The desert answered differently. But Austin was only the beginning. Drive farther east and you reach Eureka. If Austin tells the story of silver, Eureka tells the story of what happens when an entire industrial economy becomes dependent on one difficult resource. Eureka's mines produced silver and lead, but they were always difficult to process. Eventually, improved smelting technology allowed the town's mining industry to explode. By the late 19th century, Eureka had become one of Nevada's major industrial centers. The landscape around it changed. Mines expanded, smelters operated, railroads arrived. Workers poured into the region. But industrial growth created another problem. Fuel. The smelters needed charcoal, and charcoal required enormous quantities of wood. Workers began cutting trees from the surrounding mountains and turning them into charcoal. Forests that had existed for centuries were consumed to feed an industry that wanted to produce more wealth. And many of the people doing this work were immigrants, Italian and Swiss charcoal burners, lived in isolated camps in the hills round Eureka. They performed difficult labor far from the town itself, producing the fuel that allowed the mines and smelters to operate. Then the workers demanded better pay. A labor dispute escalated. In 1879, violence at Fish Creek resulted in the deaths of several Italian charcoal workers. Today, Eureka can look peaceful. Historic buildings stand along its streets. The courthouse remains. The surrounding mountains are quiet. But underneath that quiet is a story about immigration, labor, wealth, and violence. That's the strange thing about US-50. The emptiness makes you think nothing happened. The history proves the opposite. Then the road continues eventually. You reach Eli, and Eli represents another chapter. Copper. By the early 20th century, copper mining transformed the area around Eli into a major industrial operation. Railroads were constructed to transport ore. Smelters processed it. Workers arrived. Infrastructure expanded, and like the earlier silver towns, Eli had something that helped it survive. A stronger connection to the outside world. The railroad could move enormous quantities of material. The town could support a larger industrial economy. And when mining changed, parts of Eli adapted. Today, the Nevada Northern Railway preserves some of that industrial history. Historic locomotives and railroad infrastructure remain, allowing visitors to experience the machinery that once carried the economic lifeblood of the region. But then came the automobile. In 1913. The Lincoln Highway was proposed as one of America's first major transcontinental automobile routes. Its Nevada alignment followed much of the older transportation corridor through the Great Basin. What had once been traveled by horses and wagons was now being crossed by automobiles. But these early roads were not what we think of as highways today. They could be rough. They could be muddy. They could be difficult to navigate. Drivers carried spare tires, water, food and tools because a breakdown didn't necessarily mean waiting 10 minutes for roadside assistance. Sometimes it meant waiting a very long time. And that brings us to the most important transformation in the story. The interstate. In the 20th century, America began building a faster, more standardized national highway system. Interstate 80 crossed northern Nevada, following a different transportation corridor. It offered faster travel across the state. And traffic followed the faster road. Trucks moved north, travelers moved north. Businesses that depended on passing traffic began losing customers. Motels closed. Gas stations disappeared. Some communities became smaller. The same road that had once connected Nevada to the rest of America was gradually being bypassed by the New America. And this is where the loneliness begins. Not because the road became dangerous, not because someone closed it, but because the country found another way to get where it was going. That is a much more interesting explanation. As -50 became a road between destinations rather than a destination itself. Then came 1986. Life magazine called it the loneliest road in America. The communities along the route initially had every reason to hate that description. But Nevada's tourism officials eventually realized something brilliant. They could turn the insult into an invitation. If America believed there was nothing on this road, Nevada could say, exactly, come see for yourself. The state promoted the loneliest road concept. Visitors could collect stamps from communities along the route. Businesses embraced the identity. Signs appeared. The warning became a challenge. The emptiness became the attraction, and suddenly, people began driving into the desert specifically because they had heard there was nothing there. That is the paradox at the heart of US-50. The road became famous for having nothing. But the more you investigate it, the more you realize that nothing is almost impossible to defend. There are old mining towns, historic railroads, pony express stations, desert ruins, ancient geological landscapes. Wildlife. Dark skies, mountain ranges, and stories of people who arrived believing they could transform the landscape. Some became wealthy, some disappeared, some built towns, some built railroads, some died here. And eventually, most of them left. The land stayed. Today, driving US-50 can still be a serious exercise in preparation. Services are widely separated across portions of the route. Cellular coverage can be limited. Summer temperatures can become extreme. Winter conditions can make mountain passes difficult. If your vehicle breaks down far from a community, the distance that looked beautiful from a drone suddenly becomes very real. But there is another side to that isolation. At night, the absence of cities becomes spectacular. The headlights of your car illuminate the road. The mountains become silhouettes, and above you, The sky opens. No skyscrapers. No billboards. No city glow dominating the horizon. Just stars. For a few minutes. You can understand why someone might deliberately drive hundreds of miles into Nevada to experience this. Because there are fewer and fewer places in America where the landscape is allowed to feel this. Large, and that may be the real story. The loneliest road isn't lonely because nothing happened here. It is lonely because everything that once made people stop here eventually disappeared. The Pony Express disappeared. The silver boom disappeared. The charcoal camps disappeared. The old railroads disappeared. The Lincoln Highway disappeared beneath newer roads, and the traffic moved somewhere else. But the mountains didn't move. The desert didn't move. The valleys didn't move. And US-50 remained. A thin strip of pavement connecting the surviving pieces of an older America. So, if you ever drive this road, don't make the mistake of thinking you're traveling through nowhere. You're traveling through the afterlife of American ambition. Every abandoned structure represents something someone once believed would last. Every historic town represents thousands of people who once believed this was where their future would be. Every old railroad track represents an enormous investment in a place that eventually became two. Remote. And every empty mile represents the final result. The land won. That's why the road feels so strange. America tried to fill it. America tried to mine it. America tried to industrialize it. America tried to connect it. America tried to pave it. America even tried to turn its loneliness into a tourist attraction. And after all of that, the mountains are still there. The desert is still there. And most of the road is still empty. So the next time you see a highway stretching across an empty map of Nevada, don't assume you're looking at a place where nothing happened. You may be looking at one of the densest layers of American history hiding beneath one of the emptiest landscapes in the country. This is US Route 50, the road that carried soldiers, riders, miners, immigrants, railroad workers and motorists. The road that connected boomtowns to the outside world. The road that was eventually bypassed by the modern highway system. The road that became famous because someone said there was nothing worth seeing, and perhaps the strangest part is this: they were wrong about the road. There was never nothing here. There was simply no one left to see it. And that's why US-50 remains the loneliest road in America.